Now welcome back to the series turning £1,000 into £10,000. We got these two Imprezas for £4,000 and at the minute we're actually fixing up the red one which came to me with a blown engine. Now there's a bit of rust in the battery tray, so we cleaned all that up, and while we were there we cleaned and undersealed all of the entire car. Now changing the engine was meant to be an easy job, so I took the engine out and I swapped over everything I needed to the new engine which I bought, put it in the car, and I finally got it running. Now my happiness didn't last very long because I realised the engine which I bought was a 2.5 and not a 2 litre, so if I drove it with this ECU it would have blew it up again. Now to replace the exact engine which came out the car it was almost impossible to buy a full engine, so I decided to strip down the old one to see exactly what was going on and if it was rebuildable or not. So after this I was left with very limited options and I was actually starting to get a bit worried about what the hell I was actually going to do. This car is really getting on my fucking nerves. Seriously. So this was actually meant to be the simpler car out the two Subarus, and this is turning into an absolute nightmare. Now trying to find a version 1 engine is almost impossible, and because Subaru like to be Subaru, none of their parts are interchangeable. Now Subaru have basically built everything that the car needs to run into the inlet manifold. I need to keep the inlet manifold which came off this car. Now the inlet manifold which came off this car came off a rear engine, and that inlet manifold will only bolt up to the rear engine. All the EJ20s that you see for sale will not bolt up to this inlet manifold because they change the inlet manifold design year to year, annoyingly. And even worse so, I can't put in another engine because it will not talk to this ECU, and this ECU is not mappable. Yes, I could go down the line of getting an aftermarket ECU, and a lot of people have commented that. The whole point of this is to make money. When you add the cost in of a standalone ECU in itself, all the wiring and all the mapping that needs doing, it is genuinely not worth it and it would cost thousands. Doing that will make this whole car a complete waste of time because there will be zero profit in it at the end. So where does that leave us? This is an engine which I bought and I thought it was an EJ20, and lo and behold it was an EJ25, so we got it in the car and it was running, but as soon as I come on boost it would probably just run lean and blow up because it's a 2.5 litre, not a 2 litre. Now this wouldn't have been a problem if you could map the ECUs, but annoyingly you can't, so we had to take the engine out and move on. This is the original engine in the car. I stripped it down last week, completely stripped it down, and there's definitely some kind of rod knock or bearing knock going on, so this block is scrap. Now, this is where I'm going to show you the next thing, which is sitting to my left, and this might solve our problem. Now this is a 2 litre block. This is what they call a short block or a bare block. Basically this is bare, as the name suggests. This is a bare engine block. So this has basically just got the pistons and the crank and everything like that. Nothing else. No oil pump, no water pump, no absolutely nothing. Now I'm not 100% sure if this will solve the issue, but this is the best chance that we've got so far. Now Alec is a guy who's been helping me out massively. He watches the videos and he's been seeing me struggling in the Subaru pages. And he says, I have a block, it's a 2 litre block. It's not the original block that came off the engine that you stripped, but it is a 2 litre block. He says he has no need for it. It's taking up room for his garage and he would love to help out the channel. And no matter how much I tried to offer him money, he said, no, you can have it for free, which is incredible. So he built this block up a while ago and he said it's been sat around doing nothing and he's no intention of ever using it. So he gave it us for free, which is absolutely crazy. Now this looks like a good idea, but even now Subaru are still intervening and this still might not work. This is an EJ207 block, which is a later version of engines for the EJ20, and mine is an EJ20G. So Subaru, being Subaru, like to make different engines for UK ones and different engines for Japanese imports, and they have different compression ratios, and this is where it still might not work. we're going to be putting the version 1 heads on this EJ207 block because it is our only option. I cannot find an original block that's meant for those heads. I can't find one. So this is a 2-litre block. Now, theoretically, it's pretty similar, but there might be different compression ratios. And we're only gonna find that out when we put it back in the car. We've got to build this engine up from scratch, put our version 1 heads on, and pray that the air-fuel ratios are good at the end. So we need to build up everything on this engine from bits from that engine until it looks like that engine. Now this is probably going to be a tedious day, so it's time to put some AC/DC on with the headphones. And we've not even got past the first bolt before we come into our first issue. That thread's not very happy. Now this is actually the end of the crankshaft. Now this is a boxer engine, so the crankshaft is in the middle and the pistons come out to the side. Now I'm actually taking off at what they call the crankshaft sprocket, and this is what turns the timing belt. Right, look at So Alec, who I was talking about, who actually gave us this engine, was in the area and he's literally just turned over the front door. So yeah, Alec was in the area and he offered to give us a helping hand, which I'm very grateful for. So we need to strip down the old engine, and first of all we're going to take off the oil pump and the water pump. You can actually see the water pump is new because this engine did actually have a new timing belt before it blew up. Now we're not 1,000,000% sure this engine is actually going to work, so I'm not going to spend hundreds on things that aren't that necessary. So we're going to clean up the oil pump in the parts washer and make sure that the spring inside is actually working. Now I'm not going to reuse absolutely everything. There are some vital seals in the engine like this one here, which we did have to buy new because I'm not risking putting a U-seal this deep in the engine. Now there's no gasket that's actually meant to be used for the oil pump, it's actually meant to use sealant. Now I'm not going to lie, I didn't use the sealant Subaru recommended, but I did use a liquid moly sealant which I've used for everything in the past and I've never had an issue with it. Now don't worry, I only used a gun to knit them up. I did actually torque them down and it was something stupid like 5 foot-pound or something, I can't remember. It's 6 foot-pound.
6.4 apparently.
6.4.
No, 6.4 newton meters.
Oh, that's not very tight.
4.7
foot-pounds.
So.
Now again, this water pump was pretty much brand new and so was the gasket that was on it. So we did reuse the water pump gasket as it was perfectly smooth, perfectly flat, but we did just put a little bit of sealant on each side just to help out. We probably didn't need it, but I'd rather it not leak than leak. Alright, 12 newton meters. I don't like that.
No, I don't. That's not.
I don't like that. Now it is good to follow torque specs, but sometimes you do have to use your head. We are working with old threads, old bolts and old engine blocks. The torque spec that Subaru said, none of us agreed that we should go any tighter. We was only a little bit short in the torque spec, but we were very close to snapping a bolt in this block, so we decided just to go a little bit less than what Subaru recommended because we didn't want to snap a bolt in there. Now there was actually a new timing belt kit on this old engine, so we're going to reuse the tension to save us a little bit of money. Now you might have seen people say you can't do this on YouTube, but trust me, you can. This is how the real world works. You can actually squeeze the tensioner back together. You just got to go nice and slowly, and then once you've put it all the way in, you can put a little pin in it, and it's ready to go on the new engine. So we're actually going to take off the sump now. 1, because we've got to transfer it over, and 2, it'd be good to actually see if it's obvious what's knocking, you know, if is a rod bent or is it just a case that the bearing, that the crank's floating around. It'd be interesting to see. So I'm gonna get some brake cleaner, just clean all this off because I hate getting my hands dirty, and then we'll whack the sump off and see what the hell is going on in there. Now the oil filter housing was covering one of the sump bolts, so we had to take off the oil filter, loosen the oil filter housing, spin it around a little bit, and we could finally access that final bolt on the sump.
So before we could actually see the rods and see the crankshaft, we actually have to take off this sump baffle, which we're going to be transferring over to the new engine. And you can actually see the oil pickup there at the bottom as well, which also is going to be going on to the new engine after a clean.
Oh my god. Oh my god. What the hell? Is that all of them?
That should be one, wouldn't it?
No. Wow.
Now what you're seeing there is the rod basically floating on the crank, which means that the bearing is probably not there anymore. Now we did try for around 20-30 minutes to split this block apart so we could fully see what's happened to this bearing, but every single bolt was rounding and it was just not a fun place to be, and it wasn't going well at all. So we had to give up on trying to split the case apart because the bolts were just basically round and we couldn't get them off. Okay, we've flipped it to the other side and every single bolt's the same, they're all rounding, so we're not that fucking bothered. We're gonna take it all off and go, yep, it's definitely fucked. So now we're fully committed with changing everything over to this new engine. There's one thing that's going to stop us, and that's the fact that the heads have still basically got most of the head gasket on them. So we need to go and get them skimmed.
These are the cylinder heads on the Subaru. And as you can see at the bottom of the cylinder heads, I want to be careful, I don't want the buckets popping out. You can see the old head gasket and basically the residence of it. Now it's almost impossible to pick this off and sand this off because you'll never really get it smooth. And if you don't get it smooth, it's not going to seal against the block, and then you can have leaking issues, big leaking issues, and that's the whole point of a head gasket. It seals everything where it needs to be, and if they don't seal properly, you're going to have a magnitude of issues when it comes to either compression, burning oil, burning coolant. So it's vital that the block and the head seal perfectly. So what you have to do is you have to go and get something called a head skim, and they'll put them on a block and they'll take off a tiny amount of metal so it's perfectly level and perfectly smooth, ready for your new head gasket. Now a machine shop does have to do this, and luckily enough for me there's one around the corner, well 10 minutes away, and I've used them before and they are pretty good. But annoyingly for me, because there's two different heads on the Subaru, I've got to pay to have it done twice. I thought since they're two small heads they could put them on one block, one throw over, but that's not the case. I've got to pay twice. So, but it's not the end of the world. It's about 100 quid for two of them. And more annoyingly, it's basically just where I've just come from this morning, so we're going to go back there now. Old Lee would have been very annoyed about making this trip twice because I've just been there, but new Lee on Holy doesn't care and he's up for anything. Well, not anything, don't get too carried away. Now Holy is an award-winning energy drink from Germany, and it's designed specifically to stop you feeling like a miserable bar steward. It has zero sugar and zero artificial flavours in here, with over 14 different vitamins and nootropics designed specifically to lift your mood and give you a longer acting, feeling better self throughout the whole day. I went through a very rough stage of my life where I just didn't want to do anything, and YouTube was one of those things that I was considering quitting. And I actually got put on vitamin B12 extra strong tablets, and they did really help. And then when I came across Holy, vitamin B12 was one of their 14 different vitamins in there. So I stopped taking the vitamin B12 tablets, and I've been drinking Holy since September last year every single day, and I can promise you it has totally changed my life. They actually do energy drinks, hydration drinks and iced tea as well. I don't really drink the iced tea that much, but what I do, I actually put a scoop of energy and a scoop of hydration into one drink. It makes it extra strong, and I just feel like I'm getting the benefits of all of them. And seriously, it is unbelievable. Right here I've got a scoop of the watermelon hydration and the orange energy. And oh my god, it's life changing.
Now, if you're a new Holy customer, I would definitely recommend getting one of their starter kits that gives you everything you need and a load of flavours to try out. But if you're already a Holy customer, they've released a brand new set of new flavours to celebrate their birthday.
Okay, so now the heads are actually dropped off at the machine shop, we can carry on rebuilding the bottom end of this block. Meaning we need to put the oil pickup on, we can put the baffle plate on, and we can actually start rebuilding up the sump as well. Ah, fucking hell. This is the thing with old engines like this, it just takes one thread like that to not be perfect and the whole thing's bolting down. And I definitely don't want a bolt like that flying around in the bottom of the sump. So we're gonna have to tap this out a little bit.
Now, alley blocks like this are great for having a nice lightweight engine, but it's not good when you're building something up that's been built up before, because all it takes is for one person to over tighten something at one point and it pulls the whole thread out of the block, which is exactly what's happened here. So I had to drill a bigger hole out to 7mm and then tap a M7 thread into it. Now, I did use a reverse drill bit to bring all the swarf out, and I ended up putting a load of blue roll underneath so that none of that swarf would go down into the engine, and I'm making sure to clean everything out with an airline as I pull it out as well. I am probably still going to run some oil through it and drain it straight away, just in case there's any metal shavings running around in the engine. Now, we need to actually remove all of the old gasket from the sump. Now, everyone tells you to never use a wire wheel, and people will use razor blades which dig in just as much, or they'll use like a little rubber thing that goes in the drill. The rubber thing works great, but in this sump there's actually little grooves and the rubber wheel will just never get in there. So I'm using a wire wheel. I've always used a wire wheel. If you just go extra smooth and don't dig in, I've never had a problem. So do with what works well for you, and this was what works well for me. Now, I'm putting the sump in the parts washer because there is a lot of bearing material left inside of this sump and I want to get it all out before installing it on the new car. And once it's fully clean and dry, we're going to put a nice layer of sealant all the way around the outside, and then we can install it onto the bottom of the engine.
Now, we've actually got I don't know what the name is for this, but it's basically where the oil filter goes on. So it's almost like the oil filter housing. So Alec gave us a spare one of these because obviously with our other engine, when it was obviously all the bearing had gone, this would have been full of like metal. Now, I did just take ages cleaning out the sump because there was a lot of metal in the sump. So I had it in the parts washer, then I had it in the hose pipe outside, and then I was cleaning it by hand with brake cleaner. So I've cleaned that all up. So I can't fully remember which orientation this goes on, to be fair. So I'm going to loosely bolt it up for now. And this basically acts as like a sandwich plate between this and the oil filter. So I don't actually know which orientation these go round. So it could be this way or it could be that way. Don't think it fully matters because they're both just kind of the same pipe, but I obviously want it somewhat in the right position. So I'm going to just loosely bolt that up for now, and then when we come to actually put the engine back in, I'll know where they go and we'll be able to get it in the right position. Now, this little plate here, I'm not sure exactly what it is, but I have heard a lot of people talking about it on the Subaru page. Now, this is a later version of this plate, and I think this is the one you can actually buy. So it's a cover oil separator. Now, this is a Subaru part. Now, the one that came on the version 1 engine is this plastic one, and apparently this plastic one is very sought after. Apparently it's more robust. I'm not sure why, because this is plastic and the other one's metal. But they look pretty much identical, but apparently this is a cool one, apparently. This is a better one, apparently. So we're going to change over this plastic one, because this one isn't even sealed anyway. So we're going to have to put some sealant on, and we'll bang this one on, but we'll clean it up first so it's nice and clean.
So after cleaning up the engine block and cleaning up the cover in the parts washer, it's time to put a layer of sealant around the outside. A lot of these parts aren't actually made with gasket because there's actually a little channel around the part where the sealant is actually meant to sit in. So Subaru wants us to use sealant, we're going to use sealant.
Now, we have also got a rear main seal from Alec as well. He's been an absolute legend on this. Now, with the rear main, it's a bastard to get to, so I just put a nice thin layer of this sealant all the way around the outside. And it's, again, you don't really need to do this, but while I'm here, the worst thing you want to do is just bang a seal in it and then have to do it again. So again, these are old engines, so they might have a little bit of marks on them or a little bit of wearing and stuff like that. So I like to just put a nice thin layer. And the thing is, a lot of people say, don't need to do that, you shouldn't do that. At the end of the day, it's not going to cause any harm. So I would rather do it and have a little bit of extra positivity in my mind going into this, you know.
And after installing the engine mounts on both sides, we're running out of things to do before we actually can get the heads back. Oh, I want them to hurry up.
I don't actually know what to do right now because we need to get the heads on ideally. I might be able to start building things at the top here, like putting the knock sensor on, put the oil pressure sensor on, the little stuff, but most of the stuff goes on the heads and we can't get that. Can't do that because the heads aren't back yet from being skimmed. I'm going to get the box of parts out for this engine and just start building up where I can.
Now, I tried to turn my attention to things that were a nightmare when I was putting the 2.5 in, and the first thing that came to mind was this coolant crossover pipe, because this wouldn't bolt onto the 2.5, and I had a load of issues trying to make something work.
Now, this is a crossover pipe, and I've had issues with this. I remember when we was putting the first EJ25 in, I had issues with this one not fitting on that EJ25, and it seems like this is the same situation again. Now, this is a block which has AVCF. I think it's like some kind of active lift control or something like that. But obviously, this block has been ran on version 3 and 4 heads, which obviously didn't have AVCF. So you can see here it's kind of been blanked. Now, with that in, my coolant crossover pipe is nowhere near. Like, nowhere near. Like, it's not, it's hitting this AVCS thing. So worst case, we're going to have to find a way to blank this and not get in the way of the crossover pipe. But even without that on, I'm still a bit worried if these bolt holes line up. It doesn't look like they do. Now, I would say to myself, there's no way Subaru have just changed them that minuscule amount where it looks like they bolt up, but they don't. But then again, I don't trust Subaru at all anymore. I don't think it's going to bolt up. So I'm going to go next door and I'm going to get a couple bolts. I'm going to get 4 bolts. They're really weird. Look how long this is. So I'm going to get 4 of them and see if this bolts up without that on. And then we're going to have to find a way to fill this, to plug this.
Having these guys next door, Bolt World, literally next door to our unit, is unbelievable. It's unbelievable. They have everything I ever need, and they're literally right next door.
Okay, so if this bolts up, we have one problem. If this doesn't bolt up, we've got 2 problems. Please, please, please. Okay, that's 2 in. Okay, come on, please. Yes! Well, we've still got 1 problem to fix. But that's fine, I'd rather 1 than 2. And this is, I won't say it's an easy problem, but it's easier than trying to source a new one of these.
And with a small bit of alley, a die set, a bolt and a washer, I actually managed to make a nice little plug for this, and I think it's time we start putting the flywheel and the clutch back on.
And just like that, we've actually got our heads back from the machine shop. So I don't want the buckets to fall out, but I'm going to flip it up and just show you the bottom of the head now. So it's been fully skimmed, so that means it's going to be perfectly flat in a machining sense, and it looks nice and shiny. So now we've got to put the heads on, and then we've got to put the cams on, and then we've got to time it all up again. We're going to put it in the car and pray it bloody works.
Now, with the head skim, we actually need to get the block nice and smooth as well. Now, the block was actually in really good condition when we got it from Alec, but we're just going to go over it a little bit more with an emery cloth and try to get it as smooth as possible. Now, this is a MLS gasket, which is a multi-layer steel gasket. A lot of them actually come in graphite. This steel one, this metal one, is a massive upgrade from the graphite ones. These are almost like a high-performance head gasket because they can hold a lot more pressure and they are much less likely to blow through. So all I'm doing here is giving the head a final clean, because I don't want any oil or dust on it at all. Now, this step is mega important. This is where the head bolts are going to be threading into the block, and if you've got any dirt or any oil or anything in there, it's going to massively mess up your tightening torques, so make sure you get those super clean.
I'd massively like to be doing this on an engine stand, but the engine stand that we've got here is currently in use, so I can't use it. So we're going to be doing it the old-fashioned way, on the floor. Now this is actually quite an intensive torque sequence. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. There's 8 different stages to torquing these head bolts down, so I'm a little bit worried. Now we are reusing the old head bolts. I've researched it and researched it and researched it. I've gone through the service manual, and at no point does it say that these are stretch bolts, and at no point does it say you have to change them. I went in the forums and I actually found out as well that everyone does actually reuse these. Many people saying they've never bought a new set of head bolts and it's been totally fine. So we're going to reuse the head bolts because we're trying to spend as least money as possible if we're not 100% sure if this engine is fully going to work or not. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then 8 stages for each of those 8 bolts.
So the first thing this service manual says is that they want you to coat the bolts and the heads of the washers in engine oil. So we're just going to use some 5W40 and we're just going to give them a nice coat. This will probably just help the torque sequence as it's going to keep it nice and lubricated on the way down.
Okay, we're in the last stage, so this is another 90 degrees. Now these 2 middle ones are tight, so this is a bit scary. Woo! Woo! Yes! One done!
Now it's scary doing head bolts because we've all seen those videos where people are torquing them down and it goes dung and it just completely snaps and the head snaps in the block. That's scary. Luckily it's never happened to me, but it is pretty scary. And every time you're doing head bolts, it always feels like it can snap at any minute. So, scary stuff.
Yes! Right, now this is where, when you're taking everything apart, it's good to label everything and take photos of everything. So I've got these cams and them bolts in one bag. So I've got left top and I've got camshaft number 4. And one of these is labeled number 4. And I've got left bottom, so it's left side of the engine, bottom cam, exhaust cam, number 3. And that's labeled number 3 as well. And then I've actually got pictures. All of these, I've actually got letters on the cam cap. So this one here is LE2PR. It's got an arrow of which way it's going. Now I actually took photos of where all these go as well, because you want the cams to go back in the exact location that they came out. And that's why it's important to keep the buckets in place as well on the engine. So we want the buckets in the exact same place and we want the cam caps on the exact same place, because they all would have worn accordingly to each other and you don't want to mess those up. So I'm going to head back to my photos and we're going to bolt all the cams in now as well.
Now the first thing you want to do is clean off the cams and also put a little bit of engine oil just on the inside of the cam cap. Now the cams are a vital part of the engine timing, but we can always change that later, so just throw them in where it sits nicely. Now you do want to tighten these down in like a crisscross pattern because there is quite a lot of pressure on those buckets and the cams, so you don't want to tighten one side and then tighten the other side because you could potentially actually snap the camshaft. Now I'm just using my little whizzer here just to whiz them all down so they're all nipped, and then these do also have a torque sequence as well.
So it's time to start putting on the timing belt stuff now. So we're gonna have to put this little rubber, this is like the timing bracket, timing case, timing plastic, timing surround, whatever you want to fucking call it, I don't fucking know. This needs to sit there, but I've got 2 hoses here. I don't know which way they're actually meant to go. I don't know if they're meant to go behind this. It does look like they are. Luckily, I've got the EP.5 over there, and I've realised that you do need to put these lines on now. Otherwise, if you start putting the timing belt on, there is no way in hell you're gonna get these on. So these sit nice and close to the block up here. We need to get them on before we put this on like this. This is a pain in the fucking ass. How the hell does that go in there? Okay, instead of trying to push it in, let's try and slide it down around it. Oh bosh! Nice.
Now this is the oil filter housing, but it's also an oil cooler as well because it's got coolant running through it. So this is where the oil filter actually screws onto. Now my old one would have been covered in bearing material, so we've actually got a new one of these off Alec as well, as it saves us potentially pushing a load of bearing material through the oil again. And now it's time to do the time, so we can actually do the timing of the engine now, and to do that we actually have to put the cam gear sprockets on first. Now these are really weird, they almost look like some of them gone backwards, and they're totally different. So I'm luckily I actually wrote on which way they go, but yeah, really confusing of which way these go.
So now we've got to get everything in time. So we've got to get the crank to top dead center, and we've got to get the cams to top dead center too. Now you can do that, and there's a load of different marks on the pulley. So I'm going to show you on my phone. It's quite difficult to show you with this camera. So on the crank pulley here, you've got a mark, and there's a little notch where the crank sensor goes. So they're lining up. And on this one, on each pulley, you've got a single line and a double line. So you've got a single line here. Now you want that to line up with the notch on the plastic there. And you've got a single line on this pulley, and you want that to not line up with the notch on there. And then the two lines should mark up. So that's top dead on this side. And again, you've got a line here, that lines up with there. A line here, that lines up with there. And then the two should be lining up with each other there. So, like that, perfect. Not entirely sure what these arrows mean. So now we can actually start putting all the timing gear back on and the timing belt on as well.
Now for now we are going to reuse the old timing belt and the old tensioners and stuff. Now they were actually new, like this engine, the old engine was put in the car quite fresh and then it was blew up quite quickly. So the tensioners and the timing belt are still in good condition. So we are going to reuse them for that reason. But two, also, you can actually change the timing belt with the engine inside the Subaru super easily. So if we do want to change it at a later date after it's all running and it's confirmed to work, we can easily do that. Now a lot of people were saying online to run the belt around the cams first and then install the final idler. And this did make sense because I think it would have been impossible to get it round with that idler still on the engine. Now before you pull the tensioner on the timing belt, it is good to run the belt around and just make sure that everything is staying in time. But the belt was actually that loose that it kept skipping on the cam gears. So I actually had to hold the belt and pull the belt nice and tight. It did keep on skipping, so I just wanted to make sure that it was doing 2 full rotations and coming back to top dead center before I pulled that tensioner on the timing belt.
We're lined up, lined up, lined up, lined up, lined up, and lined up, and that's after like four rotations. So good to go. I've just pulled the pin, and now we can torque all these down to 39 Newton meters.
And once all the idlers are torqued, we can actually start putting the timing belt covers on, and it's actually starting to look like, well, not a bare block. So at this point, I'm getting quite excited because the hardest parts are done now. Now we can still see some of the internals of the engine and it's annoying me. I want this to be fully built up. So the last thing we need to do is the rocker covers. Now we actually put the rocker covers in the parts washer and we cleaned them up nice and good, and we've actually got some rocker cover gaskets as well. Now I like to put a little smidge of sealant on top of the gasket just for peace of mind.
Right, so this is very exciting stuff because we're basically where we were, well, about a month ago, but we're basically where we were when we were changing over to the 2.5. So we've got the bare engine built up now, we've got the long block built up. What we've got to do now is just install all the wiring and the manifold. We've got to put the exhaust manifold on as well, which is a bit of a faff because it goes at the bottom, and then we can put the turbo on, and then the inlet manifold, and all of the wiring is pretty much on the inlet manifold. So once the inlet manifold's on, then it's getting it back in the car and wiring everything up. I'm very, very, very excited, but also very nervous.
Now I'm just making sure I've got all the hard lines and anything basically that goes underneath the manifold, because once that's bolted down, it's a bit of a pain to lift it back up again. So I'm making sure by checking the 2.5 that everything that's under the manifold is actually on that engine. And we're actually at the point where we're putting it back on the inlet manifold. This is like the 4th time I've done this, but I'm hoping that this is the final time. We've actually smashed this engine back together pretty quickly, and I feel like I'm actually like a Subaru professional now. Now I was contemplating putting on the manifold, the exhaust manifold, or the up pipe as you call it on Subarus, when the engine was in the car, but I actually looked at the engine mounts at the bottom of the engine and I feel like that might have been difficult. So I'm going to jack the engine up on the crane so we can install the up pipe. Now this up pipe was bloody heavy and very, very awkward to get on. I would have massively struggled by myself. Even then, it still took me around 15-20 minutes to get one side up. The bolt holes were really hard to get to line up, and because it's a standard up pipe, it's still got all the heat shielding, so that massively got in the way, and then it had brackets at the back which bolted to the gearbox and bolted to the top. It was a really, really difficult job, and it was actually one of the most annoying things, and it always happens when you're near the end. And the final thing before we can put the engine back in the car is the turbo. So we've got a new turbo gasket there, and this is the TD.5 turbo which is going on. It's quite easy to install, it's just there is an oil drain line which is quite tricky to get onto the turbo and onto the engine at the same time. Is that what I'm messing with now? But not that bad of a job, especially when you've done it about 4 times before. And now we're ready to actually put this engine back in the car. Oh my god, I am so excited. Okay, so we've done a hell of a lot in this video. We've gone from a complete bare block engine to basically a full built engine. All we've got to do is drop it in the car and put like the power steering pump and the alternator on, but we don't really need those on anyway to see if it actually works. So next video we're going to drop the engine in the Subaru and we're just going to fire it up. We're going to connect anything it needs, fuel lines, wiring, and we're going to fire it up and make sure it runs first and foremost, because there might be a chance that we might have to take the engine out again. I'm not quite sure, but you never know. We have done a lot, and the last thing I want to do is do more than we need to do. So start the next video, we're going to be seeing if this runs in the Subaru. So we'll see you in the next video. Thanks for watching, everybody.